Introduction. When someone with an avoidant attachment style pulls away, it can look like they've completely moved on. They rarely express their feelings openly, avoid emotional conversations, and often seem unaffected by distance. But what many people don't realize is that missing someone doesn't disappear simply because emotions are hidden. The truth is, avoidants often experience longing in ways that remain invisible to everyone around them. And strangely enough, the quietest moments of the night are when those feelings become hardest to ignore. Tonight, we're uncovering what avoidants secretly do at night when they miss someone. Some of these behaviors may surprise you because while they may appear distant during the day, their nighttime habits often tell a very different story. During the day, it's often easier to keep emotions buried beneath responsibilities, routines, and endless distractions. Work, social obligations, personal goals, and daily tasks create enough noise to prevent deeper feelings from rising to the surface. But when night arrives and everything begins to slow down, the mind no longer has the same places to hide. The silence creates space, and in that space, memories have a way of returning. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, missing a person rarely looks dramatic from the outside. There may be no emotional messages, no sudden confessions, and no obvious attempts to reconnect. Yet internally, something very different can be happening. As the day fades and the world becomes quieter, old moments often begin replaying in surprising detail. A random memory can appear without warning. It might be the sound of a familiar laugh, a meaningful conversation that once brought comfort, or a small moment that seemed insignificant at the time but now carries unexpected emotional weight. The strange thing about memories is that they don't always return in chronological order. Sometimes it's the smallest details that become the hardest to forget. A particular song may trigger thoughts of the past. A phrase someone used often may suddenly echo in the mind. Even a familiar place seen earlier in the day can awaken memories that stay present long after the lights go out. These moments can create a powerful sense of connection, even when distance has existed for weeks, months, or longer. What makes this experience especially complicated is that avoidants often try to maintain emotional control. They may tell themselves they're moving forward, staying focused, or putting the past behind them. Yet memories don't always follow logic. The more they attempt to ignore certain emotions, the more those emotions can quietly resurface during the stillness of the night. Sometimes these memories bring warmth. They remind them of moments of happiness, laughter, comfort, and genuine connection. Other times they bring regret, raising questions about what could have been done differently or whether certain things were left unsaid. The mind naturally revisits unfinished emotional experiences, searching for answers that may never fully arrive. As these memories replay, they can feel almost like scenes from a movie. The details become vivid, expressions, voices, places, and emotions return with surprising clarity. For a few moments, the past feels close again. Even though no action is taken and no words are spoken, those memories serve as a private reminder that the connection mattered. This is one of the hidden realities of avoidant behavior. What appears to be detachment on the surface is not always a lack of feeling. Sometimes, when the world grows quiet and there is nowhere left to direct attention, memories become impossible to ignore. And in those late-night hours, the past often speaks louder than anyone realizes. One of the most misunderstood things about people with an avoidant attachment style is the assumption that distance means indifference. Because they rarely express their emotions openly, many assume that once they step back, they stop caring altogether. But emotional distance and emotional absence are not the same thing. In many cases, the feelings remain present long after the connection changes. The difference is that those feelings are often experienced privately, rather than shared openly. Late at night, when there are fewer distractions and less pressure to maintain emotional control, curiosity tends to become stronger. The mind naturally drifts toward the people who once occupied an important place in their life. Instead of reaching out directly, many avoidants choose a safer alternative. They observe from a distance. Social media makes this incredibly easy. A quick search, a profile visit, or a glance at recent updates can provide a sense of connection without requiring any vulnerability. There is no risk of rejection, no difficult conversation, and no need to explain complicated emotions. They can satisfy their curiosity while remaining safely behind a screen. What starts as a simple check can sometimes turn into a much longer visit. One photo leads to another. One update leads to older posts. Before they realize it, they may be scrolling through memories, revisiting moments they thought they had already left behind. The goal is rarely to obsess or interfere. More often, it's an attempt to feel close while avoiding the emotional exposure that direct communication would require. They may wonder how life is going now. Are there new interests, new friends, new experiences? Has anything changed? Questions like these can quietly occupy their thoughts, especially during lonely evenings. Social media becomes a window into a life they are no longer actively participating in, but still feel connected to emotionally. Interestingly, they may never interact with what they see. No likes, no comments, no messages. Their presence remains invisible. From the outside, it appears as though they have completely disappeared. Yet behind the scenes, they may know far more than anyone realizes, simply because they occasionally check in from a distance. This behavior often creates an emotional contradiction. Part of them wants to maintain independence and avoid vulnerability. Another part wants reassurance that the connection still exists somewhere. Seeing familiar faces, familiar places, or signs of happiness can temporarily satisfy that need. It provides a sense of closeness without requiring them to lower their emotional defenses. The late-night scroll is rarely just about curiosity. Beneath it often lies something deeper, a desire to feel connected without risking emotional discomfort. It's a quiet reminder that even when someone appears distant, thoughts and feelings can remain very much alive. While they may never openly admit how often they check, those silent visits reveal a truth that words sometimes cannot. Certain connections continue to matter long after the conversation has ended. For many people, missing someone eventually leads to a conversation. They send a message, make a phone call, or find some way to express what they're feeling. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, emotions are often processed differently. Instead of sharing vulnerable thoughts out loud, they may keep those thoughts entirely to themselves. As a result, many of the conversations they wish they could have never happen in real life. They happen only in their mind. Nighttime is when this tendency often becomes strongest. With fewer distractions competing for attention, the mind naturally drifts toward unresolved emotions and unfinished stories. Thoughts that were pushed aside during the day suddenly demand attention. This is when imaginary conversations begin. These mental conversations can be surprisingly detailed. They may imagine receiving a message and carefully think through how they would respond. They may replay an old disagreement and create a completely different outcome. Sometimes they picture themselves explaining things they never had the courage to say. Other times they imagine hearing words they secretly wish they had heard. What makes these internal dialogues so powerful is that they provide a temporary sense of emotional release. In the safety of their own mind, there is no fear of rejection, misunderstanding, or vulnerability. They can express every thought exactly as they want to without worrying about how another person will react. The conversation unfolds perfectly because it exists entirely within their control. Often, these imagined exchanges revolve around unresolved feelings. They may mentally explain why they pulled away, why they needed space, or why certain situations felt overwhelming. There can be a desire to be understood, even if no actual explanation is ever given. The mind creates opportunities for closure that reality never provided. At times, they may even rehearse reaching out. A simple message can be rewritten dozens of times in their thoughts. They imagine sending it, receiving a response, and continuing the conversation. For a brief moment, reconnecting feels possible. The emotional distance that exists in reality disappears inside these mental scenarios. But when morning arrives, those conversations often remain exactly where they started, in their imagination. The message is never sent. The phone stays untouched. the words remain unspoken. This can seem confusing from the outside. If someone spends so much time thinking about what they would say, why not simply say it? The answer often lies in the avoidant tendency to protect themselves from emotional exposure. Imagining a conversation feels safe. Having the conversation in real life requires vulnerability, uncertainty, and the possibility of emotional discomfort. So while others may never see it, entire conversations can unfold behind closed eyes late at night. Questions are answered, feelings are expressed, and connections are revisited, all within the privacy of the mind. These silent exchanges reveal something important. Even when avoidants appear detached, their inner world can be far more emotionally active than anyone realizes. The words may never be spoken aloud, but that doesn't mean they were never felt. When emotions become difficult to process, many people instinctively look for ways to escape them. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, this tendency can be especially strong. Rather than sitting with uncomfortable feelings, they often prefer to redirect their attention elsewhere. This doesn't necessarily mean the emotions disappear. In fact, the feelings may remain just as intense beneath the surface. The difference is that instead of confronting those emotions directly, they try to keep themselves occupied long enough to avoid feeling them. Nighttime can be one of the most challenging periods because distractions begin to disappear. The responsibilities of the day come to an end, the phone becomes quieter, and there are fewer tasks demanding attention. This creates space for thoughts and emotions that were previously pushed aside. When memories, longing, or loneliness begin to surface, many avoidants respond by searching for something, anything, that can pull their attention away. What looks like simple entertainment is often serving a much deeper purpose. Hours can disappear while scrolling through social media feeds, watching endless videos, streaming entire seasons of a television series, or diving into online content that requires little emotional investment. The goal isn't always enjoyment. Sometimes the goal is simply to stay mentally occupied. The same pattern can appear in other areas of life as well. Some throw themselves into work late into the evening, convincing themselves they are being productive when they are actually avoiding emotional reflection. Others become focused on personal projects, hobbies, exercise routines, or future plans. Staying busy creates a sense of control. As long as attention remains fixed on something external, there is less room for difficult feelings to take center stage. This coping strategy often works temporarily. A movie can distract the mind for 2 hours. A social media feed can keep thoughts occupied for an entire evening. A demanding project can consume attention until exhaustion finally forces sleep. But emotional needs rarely disappear simply because they are ignored. They tend to wait patiently beneath the surface. That is why some avoidants experience an ongoing cycle. They distract themselves, feel temporary relief, and then find the same emotions returning later. The more they try to outrun certain feelings, the more persistent those feelings can become. What they are truly trying to avoid is not necessarily the person they miss, but the vulnerability that comes with acknowledging how much that person still matters. In quiet moments, this reality can become difficult to ignore. Even after hours of distractions, a single memory or thought can suddenly break through. The mind briefly returns to the connection they have been trying not to think about. It is often in these moments that they realize how much energy has been spent avoiding emotions rather than processing them. From the outside, it may appear that they have completely moved on because they seem busy, productive, or focused elsewhere. But activity does not always equal emotional closure. Sometimes the constant search for distractions is actually evidence of feelings that remain unresolved. The busier they stay, the less they have to face what their heart is quietly trying to tell them. One of the biggest misconceptions about people with an avoidant attachment style is that they never second-guess their decisions. Because they often appear confident when creating distance, setting boundaries, or walking away from emotionally intense situations, others may assume they rarely look back. On the surface, they can seem certain of their choices, but what remains hidden is that certainty and doubt often exist side by side. During the day, it may be easier to focus on the reasons that justified creating distance. They remind themselves why space felt necessary, why independence felt important, or why stepping back seemed like the best option at the time. These explanations help them maintain emotional stability and reinforce the belief that they made the right decision. But nighttime has a way of changing perspectives. When the world becomes quiet and there are fewer distractions competing for attention, deeper questions can begin to emerge. The emotional walls that felt strong during the day may become less solid. Without the constant noise of daily life, the mind gains room to revisit situations from different angles. This is often when doubt quietly enters the conversation. They may start wondering whether things could have unfolded differently. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding that never received a proper discussion. Maybe certain fears influenced decisions more than they realized at the time. Small moments that once seemed insignificant can suddenly feel much more important when viewed through the lens of hindsight. The mind naturally begins replaying events. Conversations are reviewed, decisions are analyzed, different outcomes are imagined. They may think about what would have happened if they had been more open, more patient, or more willing to communicate their feelings. Questions that seemed irrelevant before can suddenly become difficult to ignore. At times, this reflection can lead to regret, not necessarily because the entire decision was wrong, but because certain opportunities may have been lost along the way. They may wonder whether they walked away too quickly, or whether fear played a larger role than they initially admitted to themselves. The realization that emotional discomfort influenced a choice can be difficult to confront. What makes this process especially challenging is that avoidants often value self-reliance. Admitting uncertainty can feel uncomfortable because it challenges the sense of control they work hard to maintain. As a result, these doubts are rarely shared with others. They remain private thoughts, appearing mostly during moments of solitude. This internal questioning does not always lead to action. They may never reach out, never discuss their doubts, and never reveal the thoughts that occupied their mind late at night. Yet the questions still exist. They revisit them repeatedly, searching for clarity that may never fully come. The quiet truth is that creating distance does not automatically eliminate emotional attachment. Even when someone appears completely settled in their decision, there can still be moments of reflection, uncertainty, and curiosity about what might have been. Behind the calm exterior, they may be wrestling with questions that only emerge when there is no one around to hear them. In those late-night hours, certainty often becomes much more complicated than it appears from the outside. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding about people with an avoidant attachment style is the belief that they do not miss others once distance has been created. Because they tend to hide their emotions, avoid vulnerable conversations, and maintain a strong sense of independence, it can appear as though they simply move on without looking back. From the outside, their silence can easily be mistaken for a lack of feeling. But silence and indifference are not the same thing. The reality is often far more complicated. Missing someone does not automatically lead to visible actions. Not everyone expresses longing through messages, phone calls, emotional conversations, or attempts to reconnect. For many avoidants, those feelings remain internal. They experience them privately, often without anyone else realizing what is happening beneath the surface. At night, when the distractions of the day begin to fade, those hidden emotions can become much harder to ignore. The quietness creates an environment where thoughts naturally drift toward meaningful connections. Familiar memories return. Shared experiences resurface. Small details that seemed forgotten suddenly feel vivid again. In these moments, the absence of someone important can feel surprisingly real. What they often miss is not just a person, but everything connected to that person. They miss the routines that once felt normal. They miss having someone to share certain moments with. They miss the sense of comfort that came from knowing someone understood parts of them that others rarely saw. Sometimes they even miss things they never fully appreciated while they were experiencing them. This can create an emotional conflict. On one hand, they value independence and emotional self-sufficiency. On the other hand, human beings naturally form attachments and meaningful bonds. These two desires can pull in opposite directions. Part of them wants to maintain distance, while another part quietly longs for the connection that once existed. Because avoidants often struggle with vulnerability, they may not know how to express these feelings openly. Admitting that they miss someone can feel uncomfortable because it requires acknowledging emotional needs. Instead, they keep those feelings private. They carry them silently while continuing to present a composed and unaffected image to the outside world. This is one reason people are often surprised when they eventually discover how much an avoidant cared. The emotional experience was always there, but it was hidden behind protective habits and emotional defenses. What looked like detachment was sometimes an attempt to manage feelings that felt overwhelming or difficult to express. The absence of outward communication does not necessarily mean the absence of emotional connection. Many avoidants continue thinking about important people long after others assume they have moved on. They remember conversations, revisit memories, and reflect on what those relationships meant to them. In the stillness of the night, when there are no distractions left to hide behind, the truth often becomes clearer. They may not show it, talk about it, or act on it, but the connection can remain alive within them. The feelings are simply carried in silence. And sometimes, the emotions that are expressed the least are the ones felt the deepest.